Okay, I don't like speaking and standing behind a plinth. I'm a Sagittarian. I like to wander around the planet. So, I hope, can everyone hear me back up there? Okay, great. So you can tell by my accent that I'm obviously not originally from Canada, but I've lived in North America since 1990. Came up to do my PhD at the University of Alberta in Edmonton, just north of Calgary, about 3 hours north. And actually, when I was finishing up, I was wondering what I was going to do. I wanted to work in high performance sports, and actually to come here was actually my primary goal. But in 1995, there weren't any jobs that I could probably fulfill, and that's how I ended up really in Calgary when Canada opened its first national training centre for sport, and I was actually assigned to the swim team to get ready for the '96 Olympics. At that moment in time, altitude was my sort of specialism, and altitude training, and we had a very aggressive altitude training program around our two eventual medalists, Curtis Myden in the 400 and 200 IM, and Marion Limpert in the 200 IM on the women's side. But then after Canada's relatively poor performances in Nagano, I shifted full-time to winter sports. And I had that great privilege of sort of leading many of those programs in conjunction with several others, not just me, through the last sort of 4 cycles all the way through to Sochi. And then the great chance to really try and build a true winter sport institute, and modeling many of the things on this particular facility and others around the world, whether it's Leipzig or INSET in Paris or wherever. What I'm going to talk to you about a little bit is world-leading hockey programs, and I'm here to really try and light a catalyst underneath you with a sense of urgency. And a sense of urgency because of who you're dealing with, youngsters, 14 to 18 years of age. And I would remind you, it's their lives, not ours. And they are only 14 once, 15 once, 16 once, 17 once, 18 once. 365 days where you, as the servant to them, actually have to do the best possible thing for them at that moment in time, remembering that they are not miniature adults. Some of them may look like that towards the end of that continuum, but they're certainly not. And after all, you need to also remember that the outside shell doesn't necessarily tell you about the most trainable organ in the body, the brain. So you might have a bunch of precocious people in terms of their growth aspect, their physical growth, but that tells you nothing about their grit, their fortitude, their decision making, their camaraderie, their communication skills. And if you truly want to win at the elite level, you better understand those, let's say, less discernible or less visible skills are absolutely vital. We can make people strong. We can do a lot about their endurance and all those type of things. We can even teach a modicum of skill. But those other elements are vital. And then you have to surround that in their health and lifestyle. What are they doing with the countless hours that you don't actually get to see them? An average athlete, I don't know, let's say they're training 4 hours a day. What are they doing with the rest of the 20 hours? How are they looking after themselves? How are they recovering from what you've just done with them, and how are they preparing for the next thing you're going to do with them? How do they cope with travel, their relationships, money, school, the future, the end of their career, the start of their career, dealing with injury? The hallmark of great coaches is to show people ultimately where their limitations are. That may sound like an oxymoron, but what I'm trying to tell you is many people, of course, will set their limitations well inside where their true limitations actually reside. Your job is to actually show them where their true limitations are, and when they finally recognize those, to understand how they need to manipulate many of their other facets to perhaps circumnavigate those limitations so that they can still aspire and reach massive levels of performance. These are the things that give me goosebumps when I think about human endeavor. So I'm going to take you through a scenario where I'm going to try and build for you a landscape of what would the hypothetical journey of a hockey player, as a human being, but also as an athlete, if you really wanted to put together an entire package. Now I know you are responsible for one segment of that, but you need to understand where players come from and where you're handing them off to next, if you are truly moving them through the continuum of their performance and not living vicariously through some short-term outcome of yourselves. And that includes those ultimately that may or may not go on to high performance in my book. At the very least, you should be saying, or they should be able to say to you after their experience with you, you know what, coach? I learnt a lot and I had a great time, regardless of the performance level. Now that may sound strange coming from someone like me who was measured for those 3 full Olympic cycles, very much on the sharp end of the equation. Even though I was several degrees of separation away from the true performance level, the actual athlete and athletes doing the performance, I'm a service provider. My job description, number 1 thing, World Cup, World Championship, Olympic medals, pure and simple. 50% of my review. And then the rest of the 50% was what I actually did. Because you have to buy in to that whole concept. If you truly want to be part of the team, if you're truly supporting these people. Because I remind you, it's their lives, not ours. We choose to serve, we choose to support. So, job is really to make you think, to throw the proverbial rock in the pond and cause some ripples. I do not expect you to believe or even support everything I say. Why would I? The whole point is to push you. Deliberately I'll push some buttons. I'll say some stuff that's deliberately obnoxious perhaps to you. Makes your skin crawl. But I have to get your emotion because I guarantee that's the only way you will change. The only way. It's too easy to do the same rubbish over and over again. We all know the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. But I tell you this, if you always do what you've always done, you will always get what you've always got. Pretty damn simple. Sport is nothing if it is not about change and change management. What won in London in the swimming pool will not win in Rio next year. It won't. Men's 100 meter freestyle guarantee it's going to be, I don't know, very low 47 seconds. At least 5 seconds faster than Spitz won. 5 seconds. And yet all those kids that are going to swim in that Olympic final next year in the 100 meter freestyle, as 8-year-olds, they looked identical to an 8-year-old Spitz. It's just in the decade and so of life of their training, the kinetics of improvement of that curve has shifted dramatically. So that at 15 years of age, they were swimming faster than the 15-year-old Spitz. At 18, they were faster. At 22, when it comes down to actually winning, substantially faster. Things change. Get used to it. If you truly believe you're in performance. So we're going to talk a lot about performance in general. I'm going to tell you where I come from that. And again, it's just to make sure you understand where you need to set the bar and how you behave. We're going to talk about performance culture in the latter part of the presentation. We're going to talk about the concept of performance on demand, which is basically this. Anytime, any place, under any conditions, you get to the performance level that is required to get to whatever performance you're trying to get to. And if you're trying to win, pretty clear. Pretty clear. No excuses. I'm fed up with seeing skiers who can only ski when the sky's blue, the sun is out, there's no wind, the light conditions are perfect, their equipment's perfect. I can count the number of races that look like that on one hand over 25 years. And if you want to win on demand, like the Olympic final for the downhill is going at this time, you can't send in a postal vote and say, I looked good last week. It's right then, right now. The men's 100 meter freestyle, I told you about in Rio. I can't remember the exact date, but it's like July, I don't know, 31st, 2016, and it will go at 7:30 at night. It will go at that time because of television. And you have to swim 47 seconds. Right there and then. Doesn't matter if you've got a tickle in your throat, your mum died, doesn't matter if you had a crappy breakfast or you had the screaming abdabs 48 hours before. You want to win? 47 seconds, 7:30 at night. End of story. Performance on demand. No excuses. You need to understand benchmarking of what we mean by performance. So high performance. For me, in any endeavor where you're looking at the performance group of the world, it's the top 10% of everyone that says they're truly competitive. Top 10%. 1 in 10 would all have to be 1 in 10, but I don't know a single sport with 1 in 10 that gets you anywhere near any kind of real representation at the highest level. Doesn't get you there. Certainly not going to make Team USA. So that's the starting point. Immediately gets rid of all the little kids, because they're not competing at that level. and old people I mean. Then you have to really look at world class. What truly is world class? And you can define it. What do you expect of a world class forward, or defence person, or goalie? What do netminders really look like who are world class? The problem with that is, of course, world class is a Kodak moment in time. What was world class a decade ago is not world class now. What will be world class in the future will make what's world class now pale by comparison. Just a relentless pursuit. So then you have to understand, well, if I'm going to try and be world class, and I don't want to get left behind eventually, I truly need to be world leading. And the difference between world leading is that concept that the Japanese call kaizen, continual improvement. It's what you are doing as a coach that elevates you above everyone else. How am I constantly improving? Yes, I have my value set. I have my constant components that I keep in the program, but how do I keep moving the marble so that I'm pushing all the time my youngsters, understanding again that it is their lives, and you may be cajoling, you may be bullying, you may be beguiling, you may be dragging them through to something they don't even believe they can do. What's the job of you? In all facets, because then you break it down into your checklist, the technical side, the tactical side, the psychological component, the strengths and conditioning and power, then lifestyle. Because without all those factors, of course, you don't maximize the ceiling of performance for them. I showed these slides actually in Las Vegas, and people wondered why at the hockey summit down there in the summer. Why would I show sandcastles? It's to try and get the point home around the difference between high performance, world leading. So you might think that's a high performance sandcastle. Pretty solid to me, looks pretty good overall. You might think it's pretty solid, it's instantly recognizable, it's even on the beach, thank God for that. But of course, 100 meters away, if you turned around and walked along, you would actually see a world-leading sandcastle. It looks like this. Now, you may rest on your laurels saying, oh my God, I got the best damn sandcastle in the world. But of course, you don't really understand your competition. So across the other side of the planet, there's a world-leading sandcastle. And this is just relentless all the time in any facet of sport. Even worse if you're in a sport where the technical side of it, from an equipment point of view, plays a role. You turn up at an event, and just the equipment has moved forward to the next level because you didn't know. And we'll talk about that aspect in a minute. You need to think about this. There's the information that you can gather around the world of hockey, athletes, athleticism, but do you have a true understanding? A true understanding of that information. You can gather all the information you like. You can be a walking encyclopedia, but it's all about understanding the implementation, understanding the noise. You can surround yourself with stats. But what are the most important things? It's almost, it doesn't matter what you call it, the 90-10 rule, the 80-20, 70-70-30. What type of things? What are the big things that solve the problem for you with the least expense to you in terms of the resources that you have? And I'm not simply talking about money. What are the real things that make a difference? What makes the real impact? And then gradually, as you maximize those things, you can start to add a new dimension. But you better really understand the process. You need to rigorously apply this all the time. You can't just do it maybe one season or part of the season. You've got to have the discipline to keep doing these elements. And you may not be the expert in each area. So who are you going to surround yourself? I have a rule in Calgary with any of the coaches I deal with nowadays. Within 3 phone calls, we should get to the answer, a real applied answer of any problem we face. Because if we can't do it in 3 phone calls, 1, we probably didn't know what the question was in the first place. And we certainly didn't know who to go to. And I remind you about that sense of urgency. As soon as the games were over in Sochi, there were less than 4 years to the games coming up in Korea. Less than 4 years. Because 4 years was the start of the games. We're now 2 weeks past that. And by the time everyone's come back and recovered, blah, blah, blown another month. So now we're only down to 3 and a bit years. Sense of urgency. You have it. The sense of urgency, however, is also the lives of these players. because you're ticking along and there are certain periods of sensitivity for them that are starting to close. Particularly once you move away from having the real support of growth and maturation through that second decade of life. Blow those opportunities and you're really sunk, particularly if you have this meaningless race to treat them like adults and you start training them that way. You start training them as though they're a Stanley Cup contender and not understanding truly the type of organism you're dealing with. You have to be students of your pursuit. Not simply the stats. I don't want to care about all that stuff. Anyone can look that up. Anyone can use Google, look up stats on hockey. What I mean is, do you understand the process of creation, the process of nurturing these players? And not just the superstars, all of them. The hallmark of great coaches is taking even averagely good people to greatness. I look for those coaches. I don't tend to follow teams so much. Well, I do Spurs in soccer for me, but I watch the soccer coaches more. The Marinos of the world. How do they, wherever they go, no matter what resources they have, they move whole swathes of people forward. Those are the hallmarks of good coaches. Any idiot can deal with the best. You have to understand, and this is something that really gets me annoyed actually. Yeah, I've got some letters after my name, would do work. Doesn't matter. And in academia, people talk a lot about the evidence-based approach. The unfortunate thing about an evidence-based approach, it is a very good foundation. It gives you a common knowledge. But if you're interested in performance, you cannot rely simply on an evidence-based approach. You need to have forward-thinking conjecture. You need people who support you in what you're trying to do, who are prepared to go out on a limb. Here's the evidence that we have, but here's what I think. And there's risk in that. You're going to make mistakes. Absolutely, you're going to make mistakes. But that's also another hallmark of performance groups. As long as you learn from them and you constantly move forward. But if you just rely on evidence-based, you are doomed to follow. And obviously in the world of performance sport, and even in performance development sport, you're screwed, to be quite blunt. And worse still, you've messed up a youngster's life, because they don't get it back. Remember, 16 once, 17 once. One of the things that really annoys me as I start to see these athletes come through and they've been treated badly, usually with overzealous competition schedules in all sorts of sports. We've not attended to the basics, like Calgary. Winter sports, most of the kids trying to get on national junior teams are somewhere aged between 18 to 22, depending on the sport. But most of them, relatively poor athletes, very poor physical work capacity, can't really deal with the training that's required ultimately, and they have a modicum of technical skill. And often as not, when it comes to tactics, not a hope, because they've all been taught to play or do whatever sport like a bunch of robots. They're almost, it's like the coaches are playing magnetic hockey with them underneath and moving them around, never allowing them to understand free flow. And I wouldn't mind, but hockey constantly talks about read and react. Bullshit! I rarely see it. What that really means is, when you see this, I want you to do that. That's really what happens most of the time. Seller's going to be harsh. You won't change otherwise. And we keep on repeating the same old rubbish, year after year, season after season. And it's their lives, not ours. So I'm going to want to talk a little bit about design and not chance. So I'm going to throw up this, okay? So one of the main reasons why I went to Winsport, which is really the legacy foundation from the 88 game, is because in that facility, I get to call the shots. I get to say, if you're going to come to these facilities that we have, the Nordic Centre, where biathlon and cross-country are based, out in Canmore, the speed skating oval, and certainly our hockey facility. We've got 4 beautiful rinks, an international service, and then 3 NHL ones, home of Hockey Canada. You're going to do what I say. You're not going to repeat the Minor Hockey Association and major junior madness that I see everywhere else in Alberta, for example. No, you come to this building, you want to use it, then you do this. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have to sign a facility use agreement. Because if you don't do it, I'm going to kick you out. And I expect to see something like the following. So I'm going to walk you through it. So I don't care what kind of long-term player development vernacular terminology you use. Okay? I happen to follow a particular terminology, very, very similar to the one you would see within the athlete development model here with USA Hockey, people strangely still seem to ignore. Unbelievable, considering the background work that goes into these things. It's a framework guide to say, think about these things as the child before you grows. How is that a threat? People doing the work for you. Say, think about these things. After all, very few of you in the room are growth and development specialists. Very few of you really understand the differences between males and females, particularly between the ages of 11 through to 16. You need to understand then, what does the long-term player development guide of whatever you're using, don't care whether you use a German version, French version, Canadian, whatever. You have the ages, and there's some gives and takes and some differences between the females in the second column. Then we look at what are the key components to playing the game. Well, first off, which hockey does a miserable job of, for God's sake, teaching the skate. Because without skating, you're not going to get very far in the game. And I don't mean just skating forwards. I mean skating forwards, backwards, side to side, with goons hanging off you, whatever it might be. Getting up off the ice, from your back, from your front. What about when you're having to skate on the outside edge of your non-dominant foot for a moment in time? Can you turn in both directions very easily? Can you still execute a fine motor task while still skating at full speed? You watch even in the NHL, the guys that actually have to go to a glide to actually make a pass. And that could all have been rectified probably about a decade and a half before they actually had to do it for real. But everyone's rushing. Rather get them to lean on the skate and score a meaningless goal when they're 8 than teach them to skate. So skating, pretty important. Then you have the technical side of the game, you have the tactical side of the game, you have competition. Notice I haven't said anywhere that competition isn't important, okay? Which is often an excuse for people not really getting and understanding growth and maturation and a long-term player approach. Because you've got to keep winning. You look at the USOC's incredible studies on where American athletes actually come from, and what kind of first decade of life, decade and a half of life actually, if you look at the most recent work, before they actually reach greatness. Then obviously preparation. Now preparation in this particular slide is very focused on the physical side, but inside that preparation are all the other ancillary skills, nutrition, recovery, the psychological component, which as a physiologist I'm kind of biased and I didn't put it up here, but for me as a physiologist, absolutely the most important thing at the end of the day, particularly on the day of competition, and I would argue in many training environments too. And then obviously the education of the people that are putting this program into place. Now I just use generic terms to try and get messages across, and we're just going to go through this sort of briefly for you. There are some targeted elements. Now I'm going to show some Canadian stuff, I'm sorry about that, that's what I know. But it's to prompt you, and there are very, very fine programs at USA Hockey in many of these areas already. It's just, of course, I'm not working in that in a daily environment, so I don't know all the names per se. But they're there. If I actually looked at the literature in hockey, and this is not a slur to any of the other nations, but you guys as well, if we read all the USA Hockey stuff, all the Hockey Canada stuff, all the Swedish hockey stuff, and the Russian, I don't know much more about what you actually need to know about the game of hockey, because it is phenomenal on anything. I doubt if Boeing have manuals better than those 4 nations around sport in terms of hockey. You have all the resources there. The issue is, do you have the hunger and the drive for Kaizen, your continued improvement? Or do you know it all, based on possibly what you were taught? Where was that? I'm looking around the room. Some of you are close to my age, for God's sake. So that could be like 40 years ago. Some of you may have played more recently, but you're still a product of that era and that thinking. And it's not that it's all wrong. It's not that it's all wrong at all. But what are the real nuggets? What are your own personal biases that you keep repeating, actually, that don't necessarily give you much of a return on that investment? So the core element is skating. So what does skating look like? Well, it doesn't have to look like anything majorly organized. Why I chose this picture is that, yeah, there's a hockey net in the background, but someone is actually getting them to first steps. Someone's actually trying to do something. So often that may be parents, whatever it takes, and then you move them into some kind of structured format. But it better be fun, because these kids will not come back week in, week out unless they're having fun. Then you get a bit more recognizable forms as you start to move them away from basically being able to skate and skate competently for a 3 through to 6-year-old, for a 3 through to 8-year-old. They're not going to skate like, I don't know, a Ovechkin at that age. They're going to skate like a promising 8-year-old. But you've got to teach them the basics, because you're hardwiring this brain. And then you can start to move it into recognizable hockey stuff. But how many groups actually take that time to do it? Oh no, we've got precious time, I can't teach them to skate. We've got to do flow drills, 8 seconds on, 2 minutes standing, mind-numbingly at the back of a line. Then we have to look at playing the game on the technical side, and I deliberately showed this type of stuff. Lots and lots of kids on the ice. How much space do you actually need? What type of equipment do you really need? Can you actually have much higher levels of time on task? I would hope that phrase is actually branded into your brain. Time on task. I've got 60 minutes. How do I keep them on task as much as possible? Maximizing puck contact time if possible. Or skating time. Because the game itself is completely the reverse. It's just like golf. This is the interesting thing about sport. Golf. The whole purpose of the game is to hit the ball as few times as possible. That's the name of it. But how do you get good? By bloody hitting it billions of times. Over many different varied situations. And gradually getting to a higher and higher good percentage outcome from what you're doing. Because when you start off with a bucket of balls, you're not that good. Small percentage return. But over time, better and better. Different lays of the land. Different conditions, different distractions, different pressures. No different hockey. And one of these days, you might have someone on the ice, out of the 60 minutes, that gets 15 minutes on the ice, and maybe 30 seconds of puck contact time. Better know what you're doing with that puck if that's all you've got. Worse still, that it doesn't even reflect the fact that you're going to be under pressure in terms of the physical pressure, as well as the time domain aspect of pressure in being able to make decisions very rapidly. That doesn't happen by accident. And of course, this is the thing that really annoys me, you don't even need the ice for much of this stuff. You can teach technical skills off ice. You can certainly teach tactics. We did. We took a bashing by the Canadian press because we played ball hockey when we brought Team Canada into Calgary. We put the boards down. This is actually on our Olympic surface. Okay? And we played ball hockey, but Babcock, we've been talking about this for months. We knew exactly what we needed to do with them. What style of play were we going to have? What were the key things? Yeah, all the press were there and they just deriding us. Oh, what are you doing playing ball hockey? Blah, blah, blah. Okay, told the players not to say much. You actually be equally derisive about what we were doing. Throw the dogs off the scent, so to speak. But you can do it. And if that's what the very best do, I can assure you. Obviously, we were handicapped about the rules, about what we were doing, but I want to tell you that you do not need to squander your precious ice time all the time on some of the fundamentals. Better to have taught them some things so that when you come to the ice, they're already in tune with you. Certainly for tactics, and I would argue even for basic skills. Wow, just look at the impact of inline skating. Even this country in particular, in the move through. Then of course there's actually what competition looks like. Heaven God, why a parent would ever argue about the top picture, I don't know. Cross ice. Think of the size of the players. Think of the type of demands they're wanting. What really also grates me, and we've got this beautiful little blue puck. Oh no, you can't use the blue puck. It's not hockey, you've got to use the black puck. So you watch a bunch of 7 and 8-year-olds on the weekend with this bloody heavy puck. Parents are screaming at them, ice the puck! Okay? Not only do they not understand from a cognitive point of view the angling, but they also don't have the strength, of course, at that age to get the puck out of their own zone. But why? So that adults can have some kind of vicarious entertainment. No consideration of the fact that it's those 7 and 8-year-olds' lives, and you want to try and improve their lot. and give them the opportunity. I also find this rush for early specialization, even in the dry land type of work, very, very troublesome. So we create these specialists all the time, even as late as 15, 16 years of age. We're just treating them like a bunch of senior players when they can't even stand on one foot with their eyes shut. Plenty of time. And from a physiological point of view, you've got to wait for certain things to be in place. The stabilization of the hormonal system, for a start. You really want to get after hypertrophy. You need loads of testosterone hanging around the place, but you also need the whole family, because it's not as simple as that one particular marker. But oh no, we get them doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things because Sidney Crosby does that. But they're 15. And some of them may be appropriate, depending on if they're a bit ahead of the curve, and others will be spot on, and others will be a bit behind the curve for a while. But they're all ending up the same at around 21 to 23 years of age. But no one has any patience for that, do they? I just happened to take this was in Beijing. This was a police group being trained, and they never went near a weight. You ever seen little gymnasts? Nice slide. You ever seen gymnasts, little girls, 8, 9 years of age? Never near a weight in their life. And yet I guarantee they climb a rope faster than any of your hockey players will do. They have cores of ripped steel. They can throw themselves, they can accelerate, they can get up off the floor. Why? Because they have great movement skills. Plenty of time to get people stronger. Plenty of time to build endurance. Long-term process. What are you trying to do? The interesting thing about having that underlying support mechanism is to ensure, of course, that when they get sick or injured, they actually have something to fall back on. Because if they are so specific, they lose that element as they move away from that specific stimuli very, very quickly. Now you're in trouble. Now you're in trouble. Because then now the road to redemption is a long one. To come back from that. And you better have very profound return to ice programs, particularly as your kids start to move past the puberty years. Then education and professional development is a big one for me. So in Canada, we have Hockey University, we have the online components, we're going to start to do some very big things. The Finns have fantastic programs at Virolaki, for example. Other federations exactly the same. This, taking full advantage. So you're committing time to come here. And you're going to extract in the same way you expect time on task for the players. Using every available minute for them. Are you affording yourself the same? I'm going to go to every session. Yeah, I'm going to have fun in the evenings, and a couple of beers and chat with you, but I'm here for a purpose. My own time on task to learn. The next thing for me is really specific think tanks. Can you organize? One of the big challenges we face is how expensive this game is. Do you know there are 3 things at the 50,000 foot level that dictate international success in sport? Social, cultural, political significance of sport in that society. The money invested in that particular system. And then the really big one, population size. Population size. Now, there are only 3 countries on the planet currently that have all 3. The United States of America and China. But here's the thing for you. If you continually have a sport that is narrowing its population base in terms of the catchment initially, where the hell do you find Team USA of the future when you're starting to have catastrophic dropout as they come through whatever funnel to performance excellence there is? Money and resources of the participants should not be the way you get into the game and stay in it. So each one of you, if you're truly interested in performance, I know you have to run a business. You need to think about what is the business of hockey? How can you do things differently? Can you set up even trust funds? Can you run a bunch of, I don't know, McDonald's and have them funnel finance straight into a trust fund so that you could subsidize your performance programs? What I'm trying to say is think differently. Think differently. Don't use your resources to make money. Get some others. You often have sponsors and benefactors. They're usually business people. Why don't you say to them, instead of giving us, you guys, 500,000 a year for the next 3 years, commit the 1.5 million, go out and buy, with well-researched business people, some business that will then generate money to fund what the hell you want to do. Independent, it just runs in the background. Just food for thought. That's what I mean. Then maybe you have a think tank on the technical side of the program. Maybe you have a think tank on how do you move 15-year-olds further ahead in terms of their tactical competency that's relevant for 15-year-olds. Because you might not want to be teaching them the defensive system of the Pittsburgh Penguins at that age group, where their brain is. So you come back to this. We talked about that in terms of the long-term player aspect. We talked about how it's relevant to the ages, some classic differences in the ages between males and females, depending on what you're doing. We talk about the skating type of terms. So you can start to see, if possible, hypothetically, get them to learn before 0 to 4. But then you can see the late entry points. So even at 9 to 10, there's still a chance for someone to learn to skate and get into hockey if you've got patience. Although I guarantee some of you will have thought, God, if you can't skate by 9 and 10, there's no hope. I beg to differ. I beg to differ very much, actually. The question is, do you have the type of programs coming in? Then what would you be teaching them on the technical tactical competition? What the arrows mean is, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I don't need to teach much on technical tactical competition to a bunch of 4-year-olds, and even as they go to 5 to 6, what I might want to do, because they can skate now, I might, with the 5 to 6-year-olds, teach them some technical stuff. Do I have to worry about tactical competition? No. But you'll have them scrimmaging because they want to play. But what does scrimmaging look like for a bunch of 5 to 6-year-olds? And so forth. And you can see how it builds. So what is your curriculum building? Why is it we understand that you go, and it's relevant for the age groups we're talking about here, for you. You go to grade school, you get grade 1, all the way to grade 12. And then you graduate. And in grade 1, there is a curriculum designed for those 5-year-olds. It's taught by someone that understands 5-year-olds and the curriculum. And the assessment, aka competition, is relevant to 5-year-olds. They're not taking a watered-down NHL assessment and putting it in place for them. And then as they're competent, although not strictly true at that age, they move to grade 2. And they build on what they've learned. And then to grade 3 and 4. And the exam, aka competition, doesn't really get too serious until about grade 10, 11, 12. It really doesn't. It's all been about the process up until that point. Building the capacity, building the knowledge, building the understanding, then putting it into play. How come school understands that? How come the arts, music, grade 1 through grade 8, ballet? But we don't get it in sport. Why? Because we have this unfortunate ogre that is the adult view of the world. And we rush all the way through. And we allow people to advance simply because they're a year older. Not because they're necessarily good, or worse still, they move up and they will reach a ceiling because they're not that good. And then we discard them. And they may not be that good simply because of how the planets have aligned for them. They didn't grow as much. They're actually quite skilled, and you'll come up with excuses, guaranteed using. Oh, it's very skilled, but it's too small. Too small to meet the lineup right now. Well, I don't care. I don't care, because in my game, I want to win when it matters. Then what type of things would you do off ice with them? Notice even the terms I'm using. This is not some manic NHL or even Olympic training session. Physical literacy, just like the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, but for movement skills, so running, jumping, throwing, kicking, striking, all those types of things. Agility, balance, coordination. All kind of important. Rhythm. The rhythm of skating, the rhythm of the slap shot, the rhythm of the glove save. Rhythm is extremely important. What kind of music do you use to aid that process, perhaps, in training? And then, what do you need to teach people that are teaching that? You need to understand that down at the bottom, we need to have programs that are teaching, instruction, and coaching of youngsters. And you can be a high-performance coach of youngsters. And the only thing that's high performance is you are high performance, not them. You're high performance because you're delivering a world-leading program for a bunch of 8-year-olds. And so the story goes on. You get up to the next group, You're constantly trying to improve their skating capability. You're moving them to ever advanced technical execution. Harder and harder, faster and faster, smaller space, cutting it down, cutting down, cutting it down. Oh, there's a message. Smaller space, less time. Oh, no, we've got to use the whole ice. Oh, I'm going to put 15 players on there as well. Completely self-defeating. Doesn't actually reflect the game. It's as though we don't watch the game and we do something completely different in practice. And then what type of sports-specific type of training comes in? It's relatively late in the process. And then what do we need to teach the coaches of them? Well, they're coaching young players. So they need to be experts. You guys need to be experts in young players. Because that's what you've got. Not miniature NHLs, not miniature Team USA or anything else. Young players. That's what you need to be an expert in. And so it goes on. And then maybe now you've got to dovetail with, if you're truly interested in performance, whatever the national team programs are in that particular age that you're looking at now. These might be your U17, U18, men and women's type programs. You can throw in the sledge there as well, depending on how young. I actually don't know how young USA Hockey goes with the sledge programs. And then all the performance development teams, which is definitely, from what I understand, the groups that you're in. These 8,000 plus players that are starting to self-select into this. Self-selecting across a number of different things. Their own motivation and desire and capability, their financial capability, which is pretty clear. But what are we teaching you? We need you to coach young players again. Because they're moving into that high performance development realm. They're not there yet. If we actually finish their careers right then, it wouldn't matter to the world. It would not matter to the world. It wouldn't even matter to the hockey world if their careers ended right there. Because they actually haven't done anything. Nothing. But we treat them like superstars as though they've achieved the world. Oh, nothing in the grand scheme of things. Then you get up to more serious stuff, but still, until you get up to that Excel, we're still not talking about the true high performance groups. The ones that, if they did something and then their careers end, now they've actually achieved something. They've played X number of games in the NHL or the highest levels in Europe. They've been to the World Championships. They've qualified for the postseason. They maybe won a Stanley Cup. They've represented the nation at the World Championship and the Olympic Games. Now they've done something. That's meaningful, ultimately, at the end of the day, if you're talking about performance. And then for me, you want to look at business opportunities, there is untouched territory as far as I'm concerned. Untouched. And if I were you, I'd take note of some of that stuff. What are you teaching? There's loads of guys who are wealthy, loads of ladies that want to get in and understand a little bit more. You have huge growth opportunities. You don't need to do them. You need to focus on what you're interested in and get other people in your circles to do that, because there's revenue there that will allow you to do the things you want to do lower down in development. I warned you, I only get to talk to you once. I want to try and put as many peas in the pod as possible. You can do everything in adult leagues. I have 109 teams currently play at WinSport in our adult leagues. Okay? On each surface of ice, I guarantee I'm earning in the region of $600 an hour. $600 an hour. My basic cost, $120. Why do I need that money? I need that money because all the stuff below that is very expensive. And there are kids that can't afford to play, can't afford the amount of ice time that's required, can't afford everything else. I have to pay for it somewhere. So I don't mind robbing Peter to pay for Paul. So I don't have the government coming to rescue us. So the key thing for you is to understand the dashboard of the groups you're dealing with. Do you get to have these kids for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years? The longer you have them, the more opportunity you have for true influence. And getting to that point where they say, you know what, I learned a lot and had a great time, and you've moved them forward. You can have the performance benchmarks in there as well, but where on the dashboard are they important for you? What kind of components are we talking about? Here's the classic ones: the technical, the tactical, the physical, psychological, and the one that's always forgotten, of course, is lifestyle. Because they're humans, human beings. We want them to be, not just be human doings, just doing what you say. Their lives, what else? You have training and competition. Understand the difference between the two. You could also argue that competition is the highest form of training. Certainly the highest form of monitoring. You should be able to tell everything from what you see in the competition. You should see everything that tells you everything about fitness, technical execution, understanding tactics, the grit, determination, all those type of things. Fear, it's all there if you're prepared to look for it. And then how do you manipulate the training environment so that you can better be equipped for your players when they get to the next competition. I'm going to just go through the dashboard concept a little bit more for you. So here's sort of 4 phases, if you like, of sequential growth in an athlete development program. At each level, there's a dashboard. So the dashboard for the kids at Learning to Compete will be substantially different than the dashboard of the kids training to win, and I would suggest that training to compete, training to win stages are much closer to the areas typically that I understand with you. Maybe there's a few straddling Learning to Compete down at the younger ages of 14. But they're really starting to move up. The dashboard's changed. The problem you've got to understand is, if they're arriving with you now, what does the dashboard of entry look like? Where are the deficiencies? Because you don't have a lot of time with them in the grand scheme of things. You don't have them 365 days. You don't have them 12 hours a day. I wouldn't want you to either. So how are you actually assessing truly where their needs are? Or do you rush the juggernaut forward because your dashboard is so fixed on, and it's tied purely to the dashboard of competition rather than what's required? Plan backwards, execute forwards. Plan backwards, execute forwards. So let's have a look at what I mean by this. So I deliberately chosen a sport other than hockey. So you break down the training to compete one, and maybe to look at performance, there may be 3 big areas. And this is actually this canoe kayak. So you have the competition, and there's a number of key performance areas in that. You have actually training on water, so there's a number of key performance factors in that. And then of course there's the dry training. So there's a key performance factors in that. So as you break down hockey, and you look at competition and you look at training, what are the key performance areas and then the key performance indicators that you're looking for, remembering that those may change over time, depending on whether you're dealing with a bunch of boys coming out of adolescence, 14, 15, 16, and now you're dealing with young men, maybe 16, 17, 18, and so forth. And then the gladiators themselves, what do they look like? And where are the deficiencies at the individual level? Remember, your task is to improve everyone, because population and population size is the biggest thing that you can really get after, maximizing it. Doesn't help, of course, if there's a ballistic program that's out of control below you, but you need to have the patience to do some catch-up. What are the important things to catch up on? You need to understand the idea of a performance envelope. So you're trying to get to that world level eventually, but that second box up here, maybe this is where most of your kids are right now. And how are you moving them on this continuum to get there, rather than worrying what they have to look like at that moment in time? And then, as I told you about the swimming example, whereas before, 10 years ago, let's say 20 years ago, this was the performance level of the hockey players, acceptable. Here's where they all start, down at the bottom here, and their trajectory up here. Now, in the same period of time, 10, 12 years, to get to the highest level in hockey, they have to get to a much higher performance level. So you're certainly going to waste time. And yet they've still got to be kids. They've still got to have a life. So how do you do it? That's why you have to be so good. You have to be organized. You've got to actually go along, even though you're completely in control, and make it look seamless to them, because the last thing you want to telegraph to them is that you're some manic obsessive person. Because you've got to keep them having fun. Look at all the studies on team sports in North America. Number one reason for staying in these sports, as stated by the players themselves, having fun. Number one reason for leaving these sports, not having fun. And that could be for a myriad of reasons. But one of the things is you don't want to telegraph your own anxiety. Performance culture. Let's have some fun now. So what is a performance culture? Now, I spent a lot of time on this over the last 25 years, like many other people who are far better at school than this. But in reading some of the best stuff, I sort of concertinaed a lot of work. And for me, it can be summed up in these 5 words. A performance culture is the sustained ability to deliver quality. And you can add whatever the hell you like on the end of quality. It could be the sustained ability to deliver a quality automobile. I don't know, Ferrari, Lamborghini, BMW, whatever it could be. It could be the sustained ability to deliver quality food in the refectory at USOC, Colorado Springs. It could be the sustained ability to deliver quality hockey programming for this specific agent. The 2 keywords are sustained and quality, and this is where it becomes a definition and outcome, because you can define what you mean by sustained. Okay, it's not a flash in the pan. This is not some dot-com company from the 1990s that when the planets were aligned, everyone made a bunch of money, but when it got serious and the competition came into play, loads of things folded and people lost their shirts. That's not sustained. That's just luck. Remember, we said design by design, not chance. And then quality, you get to define that. You get to define that. The interesting thing about performance cultures is virtually all organizations across the planet actually say this is the single source of competitive advantage, a performance culture that is sustained, delivering quality X. The challenge is less than 10% of all organizations, from sport to business to the military, actually achieve this. Less than 10%. But this tells you it's kind of difficult, or people are clueless and don't understand it. They think it's important, but they don't know how to go about it. There are 2 central characteristics of all organizations that actually do achieve this. The first off is their unique environment and atmosphere. That's actually very good, because the interesting thing is it means you can't be copied. It's a unique setting, a unique environment. But what they all have is similar values and behaviors. Case in point, you don't think Enron had values and behaviors? Of course it did. You walk in the main foyer of their building, they're all up there on a big placard. Beautiful, must have cost them millions. Just do their value statement. They just didn't live it. They didn't implement it. Classic. Thought they were doing things, but they didn't implement it, which meant their environment was not a performance culture. You've got to work at this. And it will constantly evolve, particularly as personnel change. The greatest to get to sustain, despite personnel changes, whether it's players, coaches, support staff, constantly do it. The mindset of the Detroit Red Wings organization, over a long time now. It never ceases to amaze me that great organizations lose it. But the very best stand the test of time. Look at the blue chip stock in the United States. Look at IBM, who lost their way for a long period of time as they got distracted and went off and made personal computers for a while and God knows what else. But they got themselves back on track, but it came back to leadership, establishing them back to their core values and saying, this is what we're going to do. Everyone in? Raise your hand if you're going to be in, but you better be legit, because if you're not, you're gone. So let's look at that a bit more. So they have similar values, themes, and behaviors across a number of areas. 4 key ones. Leadership, even if that leadership changes at the personnel level, which means their succession planning is very, very good. They know who will carry the torch next. They've been groomed. Communication. Communication, the root of all things good and evil about relationships, and this is about relationships. Actions. They are all action-oriented, and they understand clearly the analytics they have to follow. What are the things they have to track? Competing on analytics. Another phrase for you. You understand the importance of this. They all have very, very high aspirations, expectations, and standards. And the interesting thing is they communicate them to the world. Why? Guess what? That will hold you accountable. We are going to do this. This is how our players behave. This is how we train. This is how we eat. This is how we go to sleep. This is how we wear our clothes and what we wear. This is how we work. When people see us on the ice, we're instantly visible because our core way of playing, our default behaviors look like this. And if we actually at least have default behaviors, we can then push the envelope in certain directions as we need to adapt. And we can always come back to our central default behaviors if we need to regroup. But if you don't have them in the first place, run lost. The interesting thing as well is they're all externally focused. They focus on their clients, players, perhaps even the parents. What does your parent education program really look like? Or even though these players may be paying you, and you feel like the servant, you need to have greater respect for yourselves. You need to value what you're bringing to the table. You need to have the guts to say, you know what? Fine. But how often do you actually devalue your own beliefs and standards because this player's good? No, he's not. He's an asshole. Maybe his parents are too. So someone's got to teach him a lesson, or actually you have devalued yourself. You have betrayed your value. Truly. But I guarantee you're looking at the short-term outcome instead, in many instances. And I would caution you on that. One of these days you're going to wake up a hollow shell of yourself. I've seen it countless times. People questioning themselves. What have I done with my 25, 30 years? And they're competitors. You've got to keep an eye on the prize. What they don't do is they don't allow internal focus and gossiping. They don't allow those insipid, incestuous, or even drinking the Kool-Aid type cultures to permeate what they're doing, because you have to push the envelope. You have to have the hard conversations. You need to get to a level of relationship where it's not personal. We can call a spade across the table and not get too upset about it, because we know what we're trying to do. It takes me anywhere between 6 months and 3 years to gain the trust of a coach. Any coach that comes in and says they're going to believe everything I say at the first meeting, that's the type of person I shy away from. But to build some trust, it takes time to get to that level of understanding where you can really talk about, we're going to have a conversation about performance today. This is not a slur on you. Disagreement is not rejection. You need to have people that clearly have ownership. It's almost like being a shareholder, but they're not shareholders. That includes your parents, your support staff, and certainly the players. Ownership and accountability. Does everyone understand what that means? Have you communicated that fairly effectively? Action. You have to have a sense of urgency. We talked about these kids. It's a short window of time. Look at your own lives. Man, I'm 56 years of age. I look in the mirror every day and I wonder where that charming, young, intelligent, good-looking young man went. Just 40 years went by. Bang. Just like that. And you're talking about these players' lives, maybe a year or two. You better have a sense of urgency. Man, that practice sucked. What a waste of time. Why? What did I do wrong? What can I do to improve? Well, it's skating. We haven't improved all season. Well, did you do anything about it? That power play sucks. Well, maybe your instruction was just too intense for them. Too comprehensive. They needed it dumbed down in the nicest possible way. I don't know. But are you asking yourself those questions? Passion, energy, and obviously commitment. If I came around to your organisation, I should be able to walk down the corridor and I should just feel it. It should be giving me goosebumps. Because I can assure you, you walk into Google, walk into Adidas or Nike, Beaverton or wherever, and you will walk down certain corridors where they're the real creative people, and they will give you goosebumps just by you walking past them. You're in performance sport with youngsters. Every day should be a goosebump moment. You should ask your players, what are your goosebump moments in their lives? What really turns their crank? You need to harness that type of stuff. And you need individuals who truly team. Truly team. That comes back to the ownership and accountability. It also comes back to impatience, sense of urgency. There's a purposefulness to what you're doing. Everyone truly believes in what we're trying to do. Do you state those goals? Comes back to the first one very quickly. This is what we're going to do this particular year. And interesting enough, maybe the first 2 to 3 are nothing to do actually with the competitive outcome. They're all about what you're actually going to do daily. So you need very clear objective components, you need defined expectations, and you need to establish the timelines. That's how you're going to get to a sense of urgency. No dithering. Season one. You need to know what you know, and interestingly, you need to know what you don't know. It comes back to the 3 telephone messages. And you certainly need to know someone who does when you don't know. And as I said, if you want to be a true student of your endeavour, true student of hockey, or any of the supporting components, from sport medicine to sports psych to nutrition to whatever it is, who is your go-to team? Who is going to believe in your sense of urgency? They're not going to put you off for a week. I can come back in a week. No, you need to know now. And do they buy into that? Do they team? They may be the greatest expert in the world, but if they are not accessible to you, what's the second best alternative? Maybe information that at least gets you to 90% of solving the problem you need. You're still way further ahead, and you did it in a timely fashion.
Oh, effort.
Why is that not working? Well, this is going to be a strange. Video doesn't show. Did that just turn off? Hang on. I think it did. Let me just check, sorry. I think the projector turned off. Does that happen?
It looks like it did. I don't know.
Might take a bit of while to warm up. Let me just talk anyway. So what could I fill in with that darts? Are some of the points I'm making coming across? You understand what I'm trying to say to you about this? So, I don't expect you to be experts in every single area. There's so many things in this wonderful game. But what I do expect you to do is surround yourself with people that can augment you, really provide you with that supplement. And you can improve across all areas. But one of the most important things is to understand who, what animal you're actually dealing with. Where did they come from? What are their strengths and weaknesses? Or let's say, what are their things that are pretty good at and things that need some more work? And in the words of Rudy Giuliani, which is, he wrote a book a number of years ago called Leadership. One of the first books I get any high-performance director or coach that I work with to read. It's a phenomenal book. Everything to do with performance, but performance in life. Just the chapter titles alone are like a checklist. Chapter 1, first things first. So as you approach a new season, what information do you need to gather to truly understand things? Okay? Chapter 2, prepare relentlessly. I love that phrase. Prepare relentlessly. It means it's never over. What you did last year, how can you improve on it this year? What you did last week to prepare, how can you improve on it this week? There's one chapter in it called Weddings Discretionary, Funerals Mandatory. Weddings Discretionary, Funerals Mandatory. And when you read the book's nothing to do with 9/11. It's all about just as mayor of New York City, what he was actually doing to try to improve the lot of New Yorkers. And so he made a rule that if there was someone who passed on, who either worked for the city, was a supplier to the city, supplier to the city, a relation to someone who's supplier to the city, whatever it might be, if it was a funeral, there was always official representation by the city of New York at the funeral. Whereas a wedding, he made it discretionary whether they would send someone. And the rationale was this. Weddings are easy. Everyone loves weddings. You know, there's the ceremony itself, it's the show of promise leading to the future, all that type of stuff. You might just have to take my call down. You know, there's dancing as well, there's the ceremony, there's the bridesmaids, there's alcohol, all that type of stuff. It's all looking cool. But funerals are hard work. They take real effort. They take us out of our comfort zone. They need to, these things push us. Even the conversations you have, there's a bit of strain there. There's the emotion, of course, as well. Well, training's a bit like that. And what you're doing with these athletes, in any facet, Because I guarantee what they will do is they will try to gravitate to the weddings of training and the weddings that they like to do the things they like to do, that they're good at, that don't hurt. They will shy away from the funerals, the things they're not very good at, the things that hurt, all those types of things. And yet your job is to kind of nudge them over this way a little bit, to move them along, so that you raise the bar, you move the marble, so to speak, every step of the way, because you're not truly dealing with performance athletes, you're dealing with performance development athletes. That is vastly different. Vastly different. They're not at that end of the continuum yet. They're close and they perform at the highest level, and you might have the odd superstar that's perfectly capable. I mean, you Team USA have got a 17-year-old currently at the World Championships. They've got a kid that's going to be drafted at least number 2 coming up. You have these phenoms, but phenoms are outliers for a reason. They're not the whole swathe of where the program is going. Cool, thank you very much. Back on track. Not much go more. Be drink time soon. Oh, sorry. One thing for me, let me get my act together again, sorry. It's all falling apart. Is to get yourself in a mindset that is cyclical. Often because we deal with linear things in life, even this development process, we treat it linearly. Age 8, age 9, age 10. Well, there's nothing linear about growth and maturation. There's nothing linear about experience. It's actually completely curvilinear. And probably quite unpredictable as well in certain areas. But you must lock your behavior set in a cyclical fashion. Plan, execute, review. Plan, execute, review. Where that review becomes part of the process to help you plan what's coming next. And it never ends. Prepare relentlessly. And then this Japanese principle. Then you're starting to live Kaizen, continual improvement. And to think you can't teach an old dog new tricks, you definitely can. So I don't know if you know who Neil Peart is. Well, Neil Peart is the finest percussionist drummer of our era. Okay? The drummer for Rush. If you've ever seen him, he surrounds himself in this massive array of percussion instrumentation. So when this video was shot, he was about 50 years of age, a bit older. And he was actually getting good time in his hands, got lots of money. They weren't doing the reunion tour. He wanted to get into jazz. And he suddenly found out one of the basic rhythms in jazz, even though he was so accomplished already, he couldn't actually do. He could do the foot pattern, it's the waltz. But he couldn't even just tap the side drum above that. His hard-wiring brain hadn't been accustomed to that. So this video is all about the fact that you can definitely teach an old dog new tricks. We may not be as plastic and malleable in our brains as we were before, but you can change. You can move yourself forward. You can take what is the best of your past and take the best of the future and the current knowledge and move forward. This is an amalgam of what he actually achieved over several months to get to this particular state. And he takes you through basically a sort of sequence.
So when I first started working on this to try to do something, it was all I could do really just play the foot pattern and then try to start introducing the simplest possible stickings across it.
coaching hockey. Then Robert Sutton, Dr. Robert Sutton, professor of business at the Harvard Business School, wrote a nice little white book a number of years ago, 2007, called The No Asshole Rule. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because if you truly want to make impact, you have to have a complete no toleration of assholes. And I know you'll meet them. You're bound into the rink on a particular day. You've got that amazing passion and drive that you have. And you'll come across someone, it could be a player, it could be the guy that opens the rink in the morning, it could be the guy that makes the ice, it could be a parent, it could be a benefactor, it could be another coach, it could be even a significant other for you. And within a few seconds of talking with them, they've sucked the life force out of you, turned you into a husk, completely taken you off task. But here's the challenge for you. You can definitely change your mindset around behavior, but it takes effort. But I'm asking you to think about, well, get rid of these people. You don't need basement people in your life. You need balcony people. You need people that are going to be uplifting for you. So surround yourself with those people. Because otherwise, the negative effects are you're not going to get any Kaizen when you've got a bunch of assholes lying around the place. You're not going to get any innovation. No one's going to really try to move an organizations forward when it's full of a bunch of assholes. Or even if there's just one. But no one deals with this stuff often. We pussyfoot around this stuff. We don't remove people. Now you can do it without being an asshole yourself. But we don't do it particularly in sport. Particularly when in age group sport where we know we have a focus of what we're doing. We have to have a sense of urgency, we've got limited resources, and yet we put up with these people. Are you going to get any cooperation? Why would anyone want to cooperate with an asshole? Are you going to get people really buying into team cohesion or cohesion of the organization? And are you going to attract the best people? Why would I go there? I've heard all this about this group. So I'm putting a message out there deliberately to make you think. I guarantee you know these people. Perhaps you might be one. In which case, teach an old dog new tricks, have greater empathy and move forward. You did some serious self-reflection. But I guarantee there are the parents there. There are the players themselves at times. There are other people that you may have some kind of interaction with. But again, do not devalue what you stand for. The very best. Don't do that. Some people may call them bloody-minded, belligerent, even assholes themselves, but they have a set purpose. This is the way things. This is what we're going to do. If you don't want to do this, it's fine. There are places you can go. Do you have the resolve, the strength of character to take that stance? Okay, performance on demand to finish. Told you before, anytime, any place, under any conditions, you get to the performance level that's required. And remember for you, every time you do go and play a game, a competition, even though there may be ebbs and flows in terms of the importance of a particular game, it is the assessment. It should be telling you about everything you've done in training. Just remember that competition for a bunch of 15-year-olds and its relevance in the grand scheme of things is not quite the same as competition for a bunch of 22-year-olds playing at a much higher level. So put it in perspective. It's an opportunity to make mistakes. Is your culture one where you allow your team to make mistakes? It's actually a prerequisite for improvement. What is your behavior set when the power play sucks? When everything that looked perfect 2 weeks ago in training is falling apart? Remember who you're talking to. Remember where you're going to take them. What are your signature processes? I love this term. It's a much better term than best practice. Think the signature process of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. The signature processes of the Singapore Airlines in-flight crew. The signature process actually of the cockpit crew getting the plane ready to fly away. And why that's important is signature processes have always been there. So in the First World War, some guy flying a plane and made out of balsa wood and canvas, he had a pre-flight checklist. But he maybe only had like 3 dials and, I don't know, a leaky carburetor or whatever it might be to check over in those days and a few cables, but he still went through a signature process. It's become more sophisticated over time, the Boeing Superliner, You know, they probably have to come and sit in that thing for about 45 minutes, go through, but the signature process is there. Stands the test of time. I want you to think, what are the signature processes for you? Because remember, you're trying to create a unique environment. What does your warm-up look like? One of the biggest battles we faced at World Juniors in Canada this year was that I've been trying to get the coaches to understand the role of the pre-game skate, particularly the morning skate. It was a complete anathema to me, I just didn't get it, okay? I understood where it came from historically, I understood why the tradition was there, but in terms of the performance component, meaningless. Totally meaningless. And we were faced with weird schedules. I wanted them to stay in bed longer, because of when we were playing. So we had no morning skates for Team Canada this year. None. But to set that up took 2 years of work with the coaching staff to get them to buy in. Practiced it a few times, told them all the theory of why. But that doesn't cut it, because you've got to get to their emotion in the end, because it's an emotional practice. Born out of years of guys way back going out and getting hammered the night before, and God knows what else they were doing. And how could you make sure they were going to be ready the next night? Well, you get them up early for a pre-game skate. That's where it came from. God's honest truth. Nothing to do with performance. Just didn't run out on the beer the night before and womanizing and God knows what else. Great. Wonderful. We had better things to do, like recovery, particularly at a tournament like that, which of course is not something that's typically replicated in most of the performance players, because they're used to the gruel of a season. Now you've got to go through a very, very concentrated, and if you're lucky, maybe you get a bit of an easy game, round robin, and then sudden death. Something they're not usually experiencing anywhere else. There's always another game, or 7-game series, or 5-game series, or whatever it is. Nothing in the rest of their career gets them ready for this. Bang, quarter-final. Lose this game, performance on demand. Yeah, you may be a bit tired because you had to play a qualifying game within 48 hours. Tough. You got to play this one and you cannot lose, or else there is no game. Next. Oh no. That should be still there. Let's go. There we go. Okay, so let's look at this signature process. Oh, and this one. Here's a signature process. So I'm an international fan of Tottenham Hotspur. Don't boo. In the English Premier League. Okay? So lo and behold, this was 2 years ago, and I hadn't been an international member, and so I joined the year before. Well, lo and behold, on my birthday, a birthday card turned up. A birthday card, signed by the head coach at the time. This year, if I should have put up a better photograph, this year it's signed by the whole of the first team squad. I don't know how many international fans they have, but I guarantee it's in the tens of thousands, okay, across the globe. And they send everyone a birthday card. You think that's going to build my loyalty? You don't think I was running around elated, I'm 56 years of age and all that type of stuff, I've got a birthday card from Spurs, yeah. Okay? Signature process. They were doing this. Took effort. Someone came up with the idea, they planned it, they execute it, and they review it. That's a signature process. Then we have others. We have ones like this one. Changing the car wheel. Well, the interesting thing about most car manufacturers is they actually don't care about this process, because otherwise they design the car a bit differently. You've got a piddly number of little nuts that you've got to undo. You've got a tyre iron like that. And this must be a brand new car, and he hasn't been out in bad weather, because normally you see people stamping on the tyre iron to undo that. And unless you've read the manual, of course, you haven't got a clue where all this stuff is. I even saw a guy recently with a brand new VW Passat jacking his car up, and the idiot put it on the B-pillar, not where the subframe was reinforced. So there he is, jacking the car up, jacking the car up, jacking the car up, and bang, subframe broke. Brand new car. Because he didn't relentlessly prepare. He didn't read the manual first things first to understand, till he knew it. But of course, there is a particular car where you really do have to understand this, because most people, they take 20 to 30 minutes to change one tyre. That's in perfect conditions. And if you live where I live in Calgary, occasionally you might have to do it in deep snow. So how do you jack a car up in deep snow? Well, if you've prepared relentlessly, maybe you put in the trunk maybe a 2x4 piece of wood or a piece of fairly thick plywood that you could put on the snow, then put the jack on that to get some purchase. No one thinks that way. Well, don't you live in Canada? Yes. Doesn't it snow over here? Yes. Have you thought this through? No. So, critical lesson. That's in the wrong place. So, you go close. Come back. Oh, what has happened here? Okay. So obviously in the world of Formula One, you can't take 20 to 30 minutes to change a car time. So how do they get to high performance, which is currently about 5.5 seconds or less to change all four wheels, perhaps change the nose cone, scrape all the crud that's sucked up into the air pods either side of the main monocoque, which is where the oil coolers lie flat. Sucked in all the grit off the road, carbon fibre debris, the little rubber beads that are coming off the tyres as they degrade. What else do they have to do? In the old days you had to put 150 litres of fuel in the car as well, so they don't use a little pipe, they used to use a honking great one, and they cool the fuel to about 10 degrees. Why? Because it would be more dense, which means per unit time you can put more fuel into the car when you've only got a few seconds to play with, 5.5 seconds. But that's high performance. Because if you want to be world class, you've got to be doing this in less than 5 seconds. And if you truly want to be world leading currently on Formula One, less than 4. Less than 4 seconds. So they think it through. Here is Mercedes practicing. This is young Nico Rosberg, who won the Spanish Grand Prix at the weekend. This is how they practice. You'll notice immediately, notice the T's, okay? And there's an inch gradation either side of the central point. Because it's far faster to bring the car to the pit crew than take the pit crew to the car. 26 people involved in this pit stop to get that task down to 5 seconds or less. And in the case of Lotus, I'm going to show you in a minute, less than 4 seconds. But they practice relentlessly. And they videotape everything, so they'll see how good the driver is at bringing this car in, putting the middle nut, the only nut, right on the center of that T. And they practice it over and over again. You'll look at the sense of purpose, the sense of urgency, the sense of concentration, the fact that in those few seconds, every member of the team understands the individual who teams. They have a very distinct role. They have to execute it, or else the team fails. The innovation that's gone into this. You'll notice the guy on the front jack, and the jack actually articulates, so he can step away, so that when the car is ready to go, he actually just has to pull it away diagonally. He doesn't actually have to do this type of business. Why? Because they can't afford to lose even a fraction of a second. And you'll see it all here. And they do it over and over again. Plan, execute, review it. Plan, execute, review it. When the car's gone, they are reviewing what they just did and improving constantly. This is a training session, no different than what you do. If you want to talk to me about performance, these are the behavior sets of performance groups. And this is a performance development group at this moment in time because they're trying to improve. One guy does the nut, one guy takes the wheel off, and another guy puts the new wheel on. 3 for each wheel. Front jack. slow. Notice this is a rainy day, because it's not always sunny. Pretty impressive, huh? But that's what performance groups do. From IBM to Formula One to hockey. And performance development, even greater sense of urgency because you have less time to be impactful. But you've got to understand where the deficiencies are and are you moving everyone forward. So that's in practice. Now you have to be able to do it under the heat of battle. So here's Lotus at the Malaysian Grand Prix last year, 3-second pit stop. Right in the middle of the race, lap 50. So, I've actually got a couple of things more to show you. I hope you're starting to understand where I come from. But it's no different where I come from you. It's just that most of my focus has been a little bit further along that continuum. Where my frustration comes from is the fact we get these kids, as I said to you, with a modicum of athletic capability, a modicum of technical, tactical, and we run out of time. Because at 22, 23 years of age in most of the winter sports I'm dealing with, unless they're right there, we can't afford to keep going back and doing remedial work with them. When it should have been done 5, 10 years before. And often because people were very misguided in what is appropriate with youngsters and then performance development individuals. I'm just going to go back and show you a couple of things. Okay. First off, this critical lesson. It comes back to the fact that trying is lying. You will either do the things that you actually need to do or you won't. And you won't have anyone else to blame but yourselves. And of course, in the Star Wars movie, this shows you change. When I was growing up, this was the second Star Wars movie, okay? Where Luke Skywalker had gone to visit his mentor, and we all need one of those, or more, Yoda, to find out how to use the Force. Because he'd been an impetuous youth. He had been a high-flying superstar. But I hadn't listened. He had the deficiencies. So he had to go and learn. So just before this clip that I'm going to show you, Yoda had given me this task. A task that he was going to fail at. But that's part of the development process. Learn and go on. So he had these sort of spheres buzzing around his head, sending these laser beams at his head. And he had to defend himself with his wand. All that type of stuff. He had to levitate off the ground a pile of rocks. And because he'd been really super impetuous, coming on too fast a trajectory in his starfighter, he'd crashed it into a swamp. So he had to put it out with his mind out of the swamp. So there he is. All this type of stuff, because he's learning. So he makes a mistake. So a lightning bolt hits him in the head, loses concentration, the rocks fall to the ground, starfighter goes back in the swamp. And then this little exchange takes place.
All right, I'll give it a try.
No. Try not. Do. Or do not. There is no try.
So that's an important message for you. In development, absolutely the ethos that you want to instill in these youngsters is all about trying. The only failure is not to try. But once you step across the line and you say, now it's all about the performance. This is the NHL. This is the World Championships. This is the Olympics. Then trying is not good enough because you either do these things or you do not. End of story. And that is the difference between really the world you're in where you want to build the ethos of trying, make mistakes but get better and better, and then finally when you say, wow, we're in the performance game. And then finally for you, you have to have this paranoia, which is basically this. If you want to lead from the front, as USA Hockey, as that band of brothers and sisters of moving the marble forward for development hockey at the highest level, you want to lead from the front, you better act as though you're behind. Every single day. And push, 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 push. Thank you very much.